1944, the Pacific Theatre. High above the sweltering, disease-ridden jungles of New Guinea, the air is thin and cold. Down below, the war is a muddy, bloody grind. But up here at 20,000 feet, it is a coliseum of aluminum and fire. A flight of Japanese Zeros patrols the clouds. They are the sharks of this ocean. For 3 years, these machines have been the undisputed kings of the dogfight. They are nimble, lightweight, and piloted by veterans who have been at war since the invasion of China. They know that no American fighter can turn with them. To try and dogfight a Zero is suicide. They are waiting for the Americans to make a mistake. But they don't see the predator stalking them. He is positioned high above, hiding in the blinding glare of the equatorial sun. He isn't flying a nimble dancer like the Zero. He is strapped into a 7-ton monster of twin-boom metal, the P-38 Lightning. Most pilots are terrified of this plane. They say it's too complex, too fast, too dangerous to fly in combat. But this pilot isn't most men. He doesn't wrestle with the controls, he barely touches them. The machine is just an extension of his nervous system. He spots a formation of enemy bombers escorted by fighters. A normal pilot would hesitate. A normal pilot would calculate the odds. A normal pilot would follow the textbook, which explicitly forbids diving alone into a swarm of Zeros. But Richard Ira Bong is not a normal pilot. He pushes the throttle forward. The twin Allison engines scream. The heavy fighter tips its nose down, gravity and horsepower combining to turn it into a falling anvil of destruction. He doesn't engage in a graceful dance. He doesn't try to outturn them. He commits to a maneuver that looks suicidal to the untrained eye. He plunges straight through the enemy formation at nearly 400 miles per hour. Before the Japanese pilots can even react to the flash of silver, Bong unleashes a concentrated buzzsaw of lead from the nose of his aircraft. He doesn't spray and pray. He fires a short, surgical burst. 2 seconds. That's all it takes. A Japanese bomber disintegrates. It doesn't just smoke. It ceases to exist, turning into a blossom of orange fire and black debris. And then, as quickly as he appeared, the ghost is gone. He uses his massive speed to rocket back up into the safety of the altitude, leaving chaos in his wake. This wasn't just a kill, it was a statement. By the end of the war, this quiet, unassuming kid from the backwoods of Wisconsin would do this 40 times. He would become the deadliest instrument of aerial warfare the United States had ever produced. He would break records that still stand today, 80 years later. But the military didn't want you to know how he did it. They didn't want to admit that their greatest hero was a man they almost court-martialed. They didn't want to admit that his tactic was a reckless gamble that terrified his commanders. This is the story of the man they couldn't kill, the record they can't break, and the forbidden trick that made a farm boy the ace of aces. To understand the pilot, you have to understand the boy. And to understand the boy, you have to go to Poplar, Wisconsin. It's the 1930s. The Great Depression is strangling the country. In the frozen farmland of the Midwest, survival isn't a concept, it's a daily chore. Richard Bong was the eldest of 9 children. He wasn't the quarterback of the football team. He wasn't the loudmouth class clown. He was the kid you forgot was in the room. He was painfully shy. He barely spoke. But while other kids were playing stickball, Richard was in the woods with a .22 caliber rifle. This is where the legend actually begins, not in a cockpit, but in a forest. Hunting in the dense woods of Wisconsin requires a very specific set of skills. You don't shoot at where the deer is. If you do that, you miss. By the time the bullet gets there, the animal is gone. You have to shoot at where the deer is going to be. It's a concept called deflection. It requires an intuitive understanding of geometry, speed and time. You have to calculate the angle, the velocity of the target, the drop of the bullet and the wind, and you have to do it in a fraction of a second, without a calculator, purely by instinct. Richard Bong was a prodigy of deflection. He didn't just hunt, he harvested. He learned to track moving targets with an eerie, robotic precision. He learned patience. A hunter who shoots too early scares the prey. A hunter who shoots too late goes hungry. You wait for the perfect moment, the undeniable shot. While he was mastering the art of the kill on the ground, he was dreaming of the sky. Legend has it that when the mail planes flew over the Bong family farm, Richard would stop his tractor, stand in the furrowed dirt, and watch until the aircraft was nothing but a speck. He told his mother, "I'm going to be up there one day." In 1941, the world caught fire. The Nazis were crushing Europe. The Japanese Empire was expanding across the Pacific. America was waking up. Richard Bong didn't wait to be drafted. He enlisted in the Army Air Corps Aviation Cadet Program. He didn't join for glory, he joined because he wanted to fly. From the moment he sat in a trainer aircraft, his instructors knew something was wrong. Not bad wrong, but confusing wrong. Student pilots are supposed to be jerky. They overcorrect. They fight the stick. Bong flew with a smoothness that was unnerving. He didn't think about flying. He just flew. But there was a problem. The quiet farm boy had a dark side. When you take a repressed kid who has spent his life doing chores in silence and strap him into a machine with 1,000 horsepower, something snaps. Stationed at Hamilton Field in California for advanced training, Second Lieutenant Bong was introduced to the P-38 Lightning. It was love at first sight, and like a lot of young men in love, he did stupid things. The official history books often gloss over this part. They like their heroes polished, but the truth is, Richard Bong was a menace to society. He treated the airspace over San Francisco as his personal playground. He was bored with formation flying. He wanted to see what the plane could do. He buzzed the houses of his friends. He flew so low over Market Street that pedestrians dove for cover, claiming they could read the serial numbers on his fuselage. And then he did the unthinkable. He looked at the Golden Gate Bridge. Most pilots saw a landmark. Bong saw a challenge. In a move that would have stripped the wings off a lesser aircraft, he looped the bridge. Some reports say he flew under it. Others say he flew a loop around the span itself. Regardless of the geometry, it was a flagrant, breathtaking violation of military law. He wasn't just showing off. He was testing the limits. He was finding out exactly how much G-force the airframe could take before it snapped. He was learning the machine's breaking point. But the army doesn't like individuals, and it certainly doesn't like hotshots who terrorize civilians. Bong was dragged before Major General George Kenney. Kenney was a hard man. He was a brilliant strategist who chewed cigars and hated incompetence. He had every right to ground Bong permanently. He could have sent him to the infantry to dig latrines for the rest of the war. Bong stood there, terrified, waiting for his career to end. General Kenney looked at the laundry list of complaints, the buzzing of civilians, the loop around the bridge, the reckless endangerment. Then he looked at the kid. He didn't see arrogance. He saw a predator who was bored. Kenney later wrote that he saw the look of a tiger in Bong's eyes. He realized that the very traits that made Bong a nightmare in peacetime, the aggression, the risk-taking, the intuitive mastery of the plane, were the exact traits that would make him a killer in war. So Kenney made a deal. He told Bong, "You want to fly low? Fine, go to the Pacific. Fly low over the Japanese. If you ever fly low over an American house again, I will personally shoot you down." It was the most important reprieve in aviation history. Kenney didn't break the wild horse, but he pointed it at the enemy. To understand why Bong was so deadly, you have to understand the tool he used. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning was not a normal airplane. In 1942, most fighter planes looked the same. One engine in the front, a cockpit in the middle, and a tail in the back. The P-38 looked like it had been built on an alien planet. It had two massive Allison V-12 engines mounted on twin booms. The pilot sat in a central pod, isolated, sandwiched between the roar of the motors. It was fast, incredibly fast. It could climb like a rocket, but it had a secret weapon that fit Bong's hunting style perfectly: the guns. On a P-51 Mustang or a British Spitfire, the machine guns were mounted in the wings. This created a problem called convergence. The bullets from the left wing and the right wing had to cross at a specific distance, usually 300 yards. If you were too close, the bullets went wide. If you were too far, they crossed and spread out. You had a kill zone. Outside of that zone, you were just making noise. The P-38 was different. All of its weapons, 4.50 caliber machine guns and a massive 20mm cannon, were clustered right in the nose, directly in front of the pilot. This meant there was no convergence. The P-38 shot a straight, concentrated beam of lead. It was a laser beam of destruction. If you could see it, you could hit it. It didn't matter if the enemy was 50 yards away or 500 yards away. If you got them in your sights, they were dead. For a deflection shooter like Bong, this was the holy grail. He didn't have to worry about wing convergence. He just had to point and shoot. But the plane had a dark reputation. It was unforgiving. It was complex to manage: fuel mixtures, prop pitch, turbo superchargers, and it suffered from a terrifying phenomenon called compressibility. When the P-38 dove from high altitude, it accelerated so fast that the air couldn't move out of the way. Shock waves formed on the wings. The controls would freeze. The stick would feel like it was set in concrete. The pilot would pull and pull, but the plane would keep diving straight into the ground. Dozens of American pilots died learning this lesson. They dove on an enemy, locked up, and screamed into the jungle floor. The Japanese knew this. They called the P-38 the fork-tailed devil. They feared its speed, but they also knew its weakness. It wasn't maneuverable. It was a heavy, twin-engine brick compared to their featherweight fighters. The Japanese Zero was the best dogfighter in the world. It could turn on a dime. If a P-38 tried to turn with a Zero, the American would lose every single time. The Japanese pilots would lure the Americans into a slow, turning fight, a knife fight in a phone booth. And in that phone booth, the Zero was the samurai. When Richard Bong arrived in New Guinea in late 1942, the graveyards were full of American pilots who had tried to turn with a Zero. Bong looked at the Zero, he looked at his P-38, and he made a decision that would change the war. He decided he would never, ever turn. He was going to rewrite the rulebook. To beat the Japanese Zero, Richard Bong didn't rely on courage. He relied on physics. He realized that aerial combat was usually fought in two dimensions, a horizontal turning game. If you turn tighter than the other guy, you win. The Zero was the master of the horizontal. It was light, made of paper and bamboo compared to the American iron. It could spin circles around the heavy P-38. So Bong stopped fighting a horizontal war. He took the battle into the vertical. His crazy trick wasn't a single maneuver, it was a doctrine of energy management that went against every instinct a pilot had. When an enemy is on your tail, your instinct is to turn. Bong's rule was never turn. His system was brutally simple but terrifying to execute. Step 1. The stalk. Bong would cruise at 25,000 feet, higher than the Japanese patrols. He used his superior engines to hold the high ground. He was the eagle, they were the mice. Step 2. the dive. When he spotted a target, he didn't drift down. He dropped the nose and opened the throttle wide. The P-38 would scream downward, building up massive kinetic energy. The speedometer would bury itself, 350, 400, 450 miles per hour. At this speed, the plane was shaking violently. The controls stiffened. Step 3, the surgeon's cut. This is where the farm boy's talent came in. He had less than 2 seconds to line up the shot. The closing speed was immense. He wouldn't spray fire. He waited until the enemy filled his entire windshield. Then, BRRT. A short, controlled burst from the nose cannon. Step 4. The zoom. This was the most important part. After the kill, most pilots would slow down to check their work or look for another target, not Bong. He used the massive speed he had built up in the dive to pull back on the stick and rocket straight up into the sky. He converted speed back into altitude. The Japanese Zeros couldn't follow him. Their engines would stall trying to match his climb. He would shoot up like a rocket, safe, untouchable, resetting the board for his next attack. It was hit and run perfected. It was a cold, calculated cycle of death. Dive, kill, climb, repeat. His squadron mates watched in awe. Major Thomas Lynch, another ace, described Bong's technique as that of a surgeon, while others were caught in chaotic, swirling furballs of death. Bong was slicing through the battlefield in straight lines. Gun camera footage from his plane later revealed a chilling pattern. You would see the sky, then a blur of motion, then the sudden, terrifying close-up of a Japanese cockpit or engine, followed by an explosion, and then sky again. He wasn't fighting them. He was executing them. July 1943. The theory was put to the ultimate test over the Japanese stronghold of Lae, New Guinea. Intelligence reported a massive movement. The Japanese were desperate. They launched a huge formation of bombers escorted by a swarm of Zero fighters to pound Allied positions. From the ground, it looked like a storm cloud of aluminum approaching. The soldiers in the foxholes braced for annihilation. But high above, invisible in the sun, Richard Bong was waiting. This engagement wasn't just a fight. It was a masterpiece of aerial coordination. Bong wasn't flying alone. He was leading a flight of P-38s. He saw the Japanese formation below, slow, heavy bombers surrounded by the deadly Zeros. A rookie would have dived on the first thing he saw. Bong waited. He held his men back. He circled, watching the formation like a wolf pack watching a herd of caribou. He waited for the bombers to commit to their run, for the Zeros to drift slightly out of position. Then he gave the order. Drop tanks. The external fuel tanks tumbled away. The P-38s became aerodynamic sharks. Bong led the charge. He rolled inverted and dove. The wind noise over the canopy became a deafening roar. He ignored the Zeros. They were the bait. He wanted the bombers. He singled out a Mitsubishi bomber. He came in so fast that the Japanese rear gunners couldn't track him. Their turret guns swung too slowly. Bong closed to point-blank range. He didn't fire until he could see the rivets on the enemy's wing. He pressed the trigger. The 20mm cannon shells slammed into the bomber's wing root, right where the fuel tanks lived. There was no drama. 1 second, the bomber was flying. The next, it was a fireball falling into the jungle. Bong didn't watch it fall. He was already pulling up, G-forces crushing him into his seat, his P-38 groaning under the stress. he shot past the escorting Zeros so fast they looked like they were standing still. As he climbed back to the perch, he scanned the sky. His squadron was following his lead. They were slashing through the enemy formation, tearing it apart piece by piece. The Japanese formation broke, panic set in, the disciplined wall of bombers scattered. That day, the unbeatable Japanese Air Force was humiliated. They couldn't fight what they couldn't catch. Japanese combat reports from this period began to change tone. They went from confident to fearful. They spoke of American fighters that attacked from nowhere, struck with impossible speed, and vanished before a counterattack could be launched. The Ghost had become a legend. By November 1943, Richard Bong had 21 confirmed kills. He painted a picture of his girlfriend, Marge Vattendahl, on the nose of his P-38. To the Japanese, that image of Marge became the face of death. To the American bomber crews, it was a guardian angel. When they saw the Marge plane, they knew they were coming home. Bong was unstoppable. He was racking up victories faster than anyone in history. And that was a problem. In war, heroes are useful, dead heroes are martyrs, but living legends are assets. And the United States military decided that Richard Bong was becoming too valuable to lose. General Kenny called him into his office. He pinned the Distinguished Service Cross on Bong's chest, and then he dropped the bomb. "You're going home, Richard?" Bong was stunned. "Home? The war isn't over, sir." "It is for you," Kenny said. "I'm sending you back to the States. You're going on a war bond tour." It was an order. Bong was pulled from the cockpit and thrown onto a stage. Suddenly, the introverted farm boy who hated speaking was standing in ballrooms in New York and Chicago, surrounded by politicians, movie stars, and flashing cameras. He was paraded like a prize pony. "Tell us how you kill them, Richard," the reporters would shout. "How does it feel to be a hero?" Bong hated every second of it. He felt like a fraud. He would stand at the podium, sweating in his dress uniform, mumbling a few prepared lines about buying bonds to support the troops. But his mind was thousands of miles away. He was thinking about his friends back in the damp tents of New Guinea. He was thinking about the guys who were still flying, still fighting, and still dying. He wrote letters to Marge, pouring out his guilt. "I shouldn't be here," he wrote. "I'm safe, eating steak dinners, while my squadron is out there facing the Zeros. I feel like a coward." The hero worship sickened him. The public saw a dragon slayer. He saw himself as a soldier who had abandoned his post. He started a campaign of harassment against General Kenny. He didn't ask for a promotion. He begged to be sent back to hell. He wrote letters, he made calls, he annoyed the command staff relentlessly. "I'm a fighter pilot," he argued. "My place is in the air, not at a cocktail party." Finally, General Kenny relented, but with a catch. "I'll send you back," Kenny said, "but you are strictly an instructor. You are to teach the new kids how to shoot. You are not, I repeat, not allowed to seek combat. You only fight if you are attacked. Do you understand?" Bong nodded. "Yes, sir. Self-defense only." It was a lie. They both knew it. March 1944. Bong returned to the Pacific. He was given a new P-38J. This was an upgraded beast. Better engines, better hydraulics, and hydraulic ailerons that solved the control stiffness in high-speed dives. If the old P-38 was a sledgehammer, this was a scalpel. Officially, Major Richard Bong was a gunnery instructor. His job was to fly alongside rookie pilots and observe them. But a funny thing started happening. Every time Bong went up for a training flight, he seemed to find trouble. He would land back at base, his plane empty of ammunition. "What happened, Major?" the ground crew would ask. "Oh," Bong would shrug, his face innocent. "We were jumped. I had to defend myself. He was defending himself aggressively. He was hunting again. But the war had changed. The Japanese pilots he faced now weren't the veterans of 1942. Those men were dead. These were kids, hastily trained, flying inferior machines, terrified. It wasn't a fight anymore, it was a harvest. Bong's skills were now so refined that he started doing things that seemed physically impossible. He perfected the head-on attack. Imagine two planes flying directly at each other at a combined speed of 800 miles per hour. It's a game of chicken with death. Most pilots break away early to avoid a collision. Bong never broke. He would hold his course, staring straight into the propeller of the enemy plane. He knew exactly when to fire and exactly when to pull up. He would wait until the last fraction of a second, blow the enemy out of the sky and fly through the debris cloud. His mechanics hated it. They were constantly pulling pieces of Japanese aluminum out of his engine intakes. "You're cutting it too close, Dick," they'd yell. "I'm just making sure," he'd reply. In April 1944, he shot down his 27th plane, breaking the record set by Eddie Rickenbacker in World War I. He was now officially the greatest ace in American history. General Kenny was terrified. He knew Bong's luck couldn't last forever. He tried to ground him again. "You're too valuable. If you get shot down, it'll crush American morale," Bong negotiated. "Just let me fly the easy missions," he lied. In October 1944, during the invasion of the Philippines, he flew into the thickest anti-aircraft fire of the war over Balikpapan to protect bombers targeting oil refineries. During one of these instructional sorties, he dove into a swarm of fighters to save a stranded wingman. He shot one down, but a Japanese fighter slipped onto his tail. Cannon shells ripped through his right engine. Fire erupted. Most pilots would bail out. Bong feathered the prop, killed the fire, and fought on with one engine. He shot down another plane while flying a crippled aircraft, then limped home over hundreds of miles of open ocean. When he landed, he hopped out of the cockpit, looked at the smoking hole in his wing, and asked the crew chief, "Can you patch it up? I want to go back up this afternoon." He was addicted to the hunt, or perhaps he was addicted to the duty. By December 1944, the number was 40. 40 confirmed kills. The real number was likely much higher, as Bong often gave credit to his wingmen or didn't bother to claim victories that no one saw. This time, there was no negotiation. General Douglas MacArthur himself stepped in. The order came down from the absolute top. "Major Richard Bong is grounded. Immediately send him
home." That is an order. His war was over. He had survived 200 missions. He had cheated death 1,000 times. He was going home to marry Marge and live a long, peaceful life. Or so everyone thought. 1945, the war in Europe was over. The Empire of Japan was crumbling. But for Richard Bong, peace was a restless concept. He was back in California, married to his sweetheart Marge. He had the Medal of Honor around his neck. He had a house, a future, and safety. He had everything a soldier dreams of. But you cannot take the sky out of the pilot. The Army Air Forces had a new mission for their greatest ace. They didn't need him to fight anymore. They needed him to explore. Aviation was on the cusp of a terrifying revolution. For 40 years, planes had been pulled through the air by propellers. Now, they were about to be pushed by fire. At a secret facility in Burbank, California, the legendary Skunk Works, Kelly Johnson, the same genius who designed Bong's beloved P-38, had built something new. The Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star. It was America's first operational jet fighter. It had no propellers. It was sleek, smooth, and frighteningly quiet until you started the engine. Then it screamed. Richard Bong was assigned as the chief test pilot. It made sense. Who better to tame the future than the master of the present?
But the P-80 was a different beast. The P-38 was a rugged tractor. The P-80 was a delicate glass dagger. It flew faster than anything Bong had ever touched, over 550 miles per hour. It vibrated with a high-pitched whine that got into your bones. Bong approached it with his usual humility. He studied the manuals. He sat in the cockpit for hours, learning the gauges. He was transitioning from a warrior to a scientist. He wrote to Marge, telling her the work was safe. He told her the war was the dangerous part, and that test piloting was just routine. He was wrong. In combat, you fight an enemy you can see. In test piloting, you fight the laws of physics. And physics doesn't negotiate. August 6th, 1945, a clear, hot summer day in Burbank. Major Richard Bong climbed into the cockpit of a brand new P-80, serial number 4485048. It was a routine acceptance flight. Just take it up, check the gauges and bring it down. He had done it dozens of times. He strapped in. He didn't wear a parachute because he deemed it unnecessary for such a short flight. No, he wore it. But at low altitude, a parachute is just a backpack full of hope. The jet engine spooled up. The scream of the turbine echoed off the hangars. Bong gave the thumbs up. The P-80 roared down the runway. It ate up the asphalt and lifted gracefully into the California sky. The gear retracted. The plane began its climb, and then silence. At just 400 feet, the primary fuel pump failed. In a propeller plane, when an engine quits the prop windmills, it creates drag, but you still have some control. You can glide. In an early jet, when the engine flames out, you are essentially flying a hollow metal tube filled with kerosene. The P-80 became a brick. Bong reacted instantly. His hands flew across the cockpit. Emergency fuel pump, on, nothing. Relight switch, on, nothing. The silence was deafening. The nose dropped. The ground, which moments ago was falling away, was now rushing up to meet him. He was over a populated area. Below him were houses, businesses, people going about their Tuesday morning. If he ejected now, the unmanned jet would crash into the suburbs. We will never know exactly what went through his mind in those final 4 seconds. Did he think of Marge? Did he think of the 40 planes he shot down? Or was he just calculating the deflection one last time? He didn't bail out immediately. He fought the stick, trying to steer the dying plane toward an open field. He held it steady. He kept the nose up. At the last possible second, he pulled the release handle for the canopy. It flew off. He turned the plane upside down to drop out, a desperate maneuver to escape gravity. But he was too low. The plane slammed into the ground. A massive plume of black smoke and orange fire erupted into the blue sky. The ace of aces was gone. He didn't die in a dogfight against a samurai. He died because of a faulty $50 fuel pump, just a few miles from Hollywood. He was 24 years old. History has a cruel sense of irony. On that exact same day, August 6, 1945, while the wreckage of Bong's plane was still burning in a California field, another American plane was making history halfway across the world. The B-29 bomber Enola Gay opened its bay doors over the city of Hiroshima. It dropped a single bomb. The resulting explosion didn't just destroy a city, it destroyed the old world. When the newspapers came out the next morning, Richard Bong's death was on the front page. But it was in the bottom corner. The headline screamed in massive bold letters, "Atomic bomb dropped on Japan. The greatest warrior of the conventional war died on the very same day that conventional war was rendered obsolete." The era of the dogfight, of knights jousting in the clouds, of skills like deflection shooting, of eyes locked on eyes, ended that day. The atomic age had begun. Wars would no longer be decided by farm boys with steady hands. They would be decided by scientists and buttons. Richard Bong was the last of his kind, a ghost who vanished just as the world changed forever. 80 years later, the record stands, 40 confirmed victories. In the Korean War, the top American ace had 16 kills. In Vietnam, it was 5. In the modern era of missiles and radar, where combat happens beyond visual range, no pilot will ever come close to that number again. Richard Bong's record is immortal, not just because he was skilled, but because we will never fight a war like that again. Today, at the Richard Bong Veterans Historical Center in Wisconsin, you can see a restored P-38 Lightning. On its nose, the face of Marge still smiles. It stands there as a silent testament to a different time, a time when a shy kid who loved to hunt deer could climb into a machine that terrified everyone else, and through sheer quiet brilliance, become the deadliest man in the sky. They called him the Ace of Aces, but if you read his letters, if you look at his life, you realize he never wanted the title. He didn't fly to be a hero. He flew because he had a job to do, and he wanted to do it better than anyone else. He flew because up there, at 30,000 feet, the noise of the world faded away, and everything made sense. He was the ghost of the Pacific, and ghosts never truly die. The P-38 Lightning was a difficult plane to master, but Richard Bong made it look like an extension of his own body. If you enjoyed this story of aviation history, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We have more stories of the men and machines that changed the world coming up. And let me know in the comments, do you think Richard Bong's record of 40 kills will ever be broken in the future of aerial warfare, or has technology changed the game forever? Thanks for watching. Keep your eyes on the skies.